Will you take AIPAC money, or have you taken AIPAC money?
I'm not certain if I've taken it or not. I've been in office 10 years. It doesn't jump out at me as I'm taking it. But I think the most important part is—
But will you for this race?
He's not sure. That was Geoff Duncan, and he is running to be the next governor of Georgia. So not long ago, he was a Republican. In fact, when Trump was looking for all of those missing votes in Georgia after the 2020 election, Duncan was serving as Georgia's Republican lieutenant governor. Now he's running for governor as a Democrat, and as you might imagine, he is quite a centrist, right-leaning Democrat, because you don't go from Republican all the way to progressive overnight. But he went on the I've Had It podcast this week, and host Jennifer Welch asked him point blank whether or not he has taken or will take any money from AIPAC, and his answer was predictably very disappointing. So before we discuss, let's hear more from Duncan. Take a look.
I think there's two important distinctions to make. I think there's whatever somebody wants to write a check and send in a contribution, it is what it is. But do you have the spine and tenacity to do the right thing? And I think that's exactly what I've done. That's a track record. I mean, I think that's the separation factor.
So will you take AIPAC money in this race?
I have no idea. I haven't even thought about it.
Wow.
Wow.
Such a terrible answer.
It's just the worst answer. And he hems and haws. And honestly, it gets worse. So he then proceeded to deliver a bunch of very lukewarm, non-committal, Democratic talking points pertaining specifically to Israel and Gaza. So let's watch.
But I can assure you of this. My answer on Israel is that this is just an awful humanitarian crisis. And as governor of Georgia, we will do all we can do to deliver that humanitarian aid and work with as much, and also to end the war. I mean, these hostages need to be returned. The war needs to end. But this is the thing that I think we all need to focus our attention on. Donald Trump has made this situation unbelievable. To make a mockery of kids that you can see their bones, you can see their very flesh hugged up against their ribs, and to say he's going to build beachfront condos in Gaza. It's disgusting.
And you know what? He is so brave for saying all of these very, very obvious things, but that wasn't good enough. And Jennifer did press him even further for an answer to her original question.
Are you going to take money from AIPAC? Because just there you talked about, and AIPAC is what helped. They gave Trump over, I think, $200-300 million. Are you going to take money from a group that lobbies to deny that that's happening to those children?
I'm not going to give you the shallow answer of saying yes or no, because I have no idea. I've not thought about it, but I will not be beholden to anybody and their check. If somebody wants to write a check to support my campaign, that's their free will to do it. And I will sit there and make the decisions that are best for, I believe, in a wisdom-filled way for me. And as Georgia, that's my exact position. Israel was attacked. It was a horrific day, October 7th. We need to figure out ways to drive those hostages back, and we need to figure out a way to deliver those humanitarian. And people need to
if
stop.
Benjamin Netanyahu would quit bombing Qatar, Doha, where the hostage negotiations were happening, then maybe that would help get a ceasefire.
He hasn't thought about it. He hasn't thought about whether or not he would take money from AIPAC. In this particular political environment, he has not thought about it. How irresponsible, how dumb. Like, why do you think that you should even be running for a candidate position when you haven't even thought about one of the biggest issues facing the people of this country on both sides of the aisle right now? He used to be a Republican. The Republicans care about all of the money that we're sending to Israel. Now he's a Democrat, and Democrats care about all of the money that we are sending to Israel and the genocide that we are funding. But the Democrats, like, we keep seeing this. This is like a story that we were talking about earlier in the show. They keep saying we need to be more moderate. We need to be more centrist. We need to be more spineless and just like bleh and just like run these like milquetoast candidates, who really, like, who does this man appeal to at all? Kudos to him for leaving the Republican Party, but this is not good enough for a Democratic candidate. And even as he was answering these questions, it did seem, if you look at at his face throughout the interview, specifically through that portion of the interview, he does seem like he knows that this is not going to go well for him, that this isn't going to go well in the long run, as far as like the whole interview, because the rest of the interview was like somewhat amicable. She was just, getting his ideas and seeing what he was going to run on. They talked a lot about his Christian background and what that means for him as now a Democrat running and representing people in the deep South of the United States. Even though Georgia is more of a purple state than it is deep red. This is just more moderate Dems. And we know, because there is data to support this, that whenever the Democrats run these moderate Democrats, they do not perform well because they don't speak to anyone. Nobody cares about them. The Republicans are not going to switch parties and vote for this guy. And the progressives are just not going to be animated to vote for somebody like this, right? He seems like a Republican who just doesn't like Donald Trump. And frankly, that's not good enough for me or for most of the American people. And Sharon, maybe you have some thoughts on this because you are in the state of Georgia.
Yeah, Geoff Duncan, former baseball player. He's pleasing enough if you're into bland. Listen, nothing in the interview mattered except the question that, thank goodness, doggedly she kept going back to. Even if you could care less about what's going on in Gaza. That's the only thing that mattered. And he showed that he's not a leader. Of course, he knows exactly what AIPAC is and what's going on and any controversy surrounding it. If he doesn't, that's disqualifying alone, but he does. So he's lying to us. How do we know? His lips are moving. This is disgusting. And by the way, he is one of those Republicans who, as Donald Trump was sending goons on the Capitol to defecate and bear spray police officers, and by the way, officers died, okay? That is exactly who he was. He stood up at that time, maybe slightly before, and said, this is no good for me. I don't agree. And that's our fault, because what Donald Trump has done has been so heinous. It's been disgusting. So we've lowered the bar to people who just say, I was with him, but now I'm not. And we label them heroes. We label them heroes. These same Republicans, and I'm not talking about Geoff Duncan, but we have Secretary of State, a lot of people who then, after they disclaimed it, went back, changed voting laws, something about we can't give out water. I mean, this is who these people are. So I don't really care to hear about his, and I'm not being disrespectful to one's, religious views, but I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it. Mm-hmm. You are working, or you want the job on behalf of the people of Georgia. And we can't even get a straight answer out of you about AIPAC. I'd have more respect for him if he said, I'm going to take the money and here's why. And that other lousy answer he gave early on about, look, people send in checks, it is what it is. No, you decide if you want their money. And if you don't, you know why. Is all money good money? And just a bum and a coward. And this is what we're dealing with. So many bums and cowards and a really low bar. We got it. It's not nice to storm the Capitol, put your feet on Nancy Pelosi's desk, defecate, and bear spray people. That's the standard?
Yeah.
Get out of here.
Yeah.
But he was a good baseball player.
Let's check in with Jackson from the Batcave.
Right, exactly. I don't know how this happened, but I dig it though. I mean, this interview reminded me of that like Miss America contestant who was like and such as
South Carolina.
Yeah, the Miss Carolina. She was like and such as. But I mean, if you don't, AIPAC is one of the bigger, more well-known, more well-funded political action communities that politicians take money from, period. Everybody knows what AIPAC is. So if you don't know if you're getting money from AIPAC, then you don't know where your money is coming from, period. I mean, that level of incompetence would just be rather breathtaking. Like, oh yeah, I'm getting hundreds of thousands and millions of dollars from different organizations, and I don't know where it's coming from. Of course, that's a lie. And at the end of the day, as Sharon said, people would have more respect for him if he would just say, yes, I'm taking AIPAC money. And there's still a lot of people who would in fact vote for him, despite the fact that he is taking AIPAC money, particularly just with the nature of politics. If he was able to put together a strong campaign where he's talking about delivering on people's food insecurities, if he's talking about delivering on people's concerns with wages, he could still put together a campaign that could win in a state like Georgia and many other places if he would just keep it 100. But that also goes to show the Democrats' general lack of interest in meeting people's needs at all, So I think that this is a bad sign for the establishment as a whole. But again, I think it's overall a good sign for people who want to see better, because I don't think guys like this are going to be winning very many elections going forward.
Yeah, and Texas, I think electorally could be compared to Georgia in a lot of ways. There's a lot of similarities there. And we have not a governor race coming up, but a senator race. John Cornyn, he's up for re-election, and it is a very interesting race if you pay attention to Texas politics. But on the Democrat side specifically, in 2018, Beto O'Rourke, who at the time was considered to be very, very progressive, came within less than 3 points of unseating Ted Cruz, which was like unheard of at the time, right? And then the next round, they ran Colin Allred, who was like, I don't even know what he stood for on anything. Like he was incredibly just mediocre, incredibly centrist, didn't stand for anything, took a lot of AIPAC money, by the way, and he lost by a much wider margin than Beto did. And now he's running again, and I don't know why, because like who is voted? Like you lost so badly the last time, like just sit this one out. But we have now James Tallarico, who has been getting some more national recognition lately. Who has just entered into that race, and I'll probably vote for him, because he is a Christian and a Democrat, but he speaks out for things like we know what his stances are specifically as a Christian, which I think is like kind of the angle that Duncan was trying to play. He's saying, I'm a Christian, but also freedom of religion is something that I believe in and that I need to fight for. And all this Christianity that's coming into politics and into public schools and things like that, he has been one of the biggest champions in Texas that the Democrats and anyone who's just opposed to the conflation of church and state, he is our champion here, is this Christian man, this Christian white man, and sometimes it has to come from one of their own, So I maybe Duncan can take a hint from Tallarico, but really people just want people who are convicted in what they have to say and what they believe in. And a lot of these candidates, they're not it. And you have to wonder, like those people are out there, but they don't have the funding behind them. They don't have like all the energy behind them. They don't have the staff behind them. So how do we get them that? So
every time you ring the bell below, an angel gets his wings. Totally not true, but it does keep you updated on our live shows.